right, welcome back. It's time for another episode of Tales from the Gridsquare. Good buddy of mine, Nick Orton, wrote this book. And like I said, every other video for this, the link to this book where you can buy it will be in the description of the video. And I'll also put it in the top comments. So that way, if you guys want to buy this book for yourself and help support a small military-owned business, you'll be able to do so. We'll pick right up where we left off with Fort Bragg bricks. So on Fort Bragg, the barracks are pretty dated, pretty old, especially the first BCT's, Battalion Combat Team's infantry footprint. Probably 3 to 4 times a year, someone dies on the footprint and no one seems to have any explanation as to why. Yeah, that seems normal. Sure. Just every year someone just dies on the footprint. From people literally driving off the balcony to taking a ton of muscle relaxers and fading away. Anyway, over the course of 4 years living on this footprint, many other dudes and I have shared experiences of entities and energies radiating from various rooms. One night I was getting ready to bed down. It was a long weekend. We stayed up until about 2 to 3 partying, so it was late. Laying down, about to fade off sleep, I hear my closet door close. Scares the shit out of me. I investigate, and as I'm walking to the door, the light turns on inside, and I can hear a slight thud and something putting weight above the ceiling. I didn't even open the door. Nope, didn't even do it. I went over to my buddy's room. We met in the hallway because he heard the same thing coming from my closet. We never figured out what it was, but I had so much shit in my closet, there's no way anything could have been in there making noise. We gave the entity a name and began living amongst it as if we accepted its presence, and it wouldn't bother us anymore. We would all feel very dark and evil vibes from those walls. I've heard of dudes seeing soldiers in their rooms. Dudes getting knocked on by no one. Regular spooky shit. Dude didn't even want to open the closet to investigate. That's good though, because that's typically the normal your average white person does in every one of those horror movies. They go investigate what happened. But these guys are smart. They're like, yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna leave that door closed. I'm not going in there. No, I'm gonna go get my buddy. Good move. Go get your battle buddy. The next story is called Leshy Town. It's Mount Site at JBLM, Washington, which is Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. It's an army base that's close by Seattle. As Op 4, which means opposing forces, our platoon stayed in the most western building next to the HLZ, or helicopter landing zone. One night I heard someone knocking hard as f*** on the door in the room I was in. I opened it and no one was at the door. Then I heard the sound of footsteps running up and down the stairwell. I asked, "Who's there?" But no one answered. I shined my headlamp with the white light on down the stairs. Nobody was down there, yet I could still hear the footsteps of someone running up. I still couldn't see anybody down the stairs though. I immediately thought someone was either f***ing with me, which I asked the dudes and everyone said they were all knocked out that night except for the guys pulling guard outside, or I was just tired as f***. I pretty much said f*** it and went back to sleep. This guy's got a potty mouth first off, and second off, that story I bet his buddies were just jerking him around. Not literally, but like they were messing with him, right? There's not as much evidence there. Like the other one, the guy turned on, like the guy looked at his closet, heard a thud, and the light turned on. That would have got me. But this, I don't know. Anyway, next story. The UXO call. So when we arrived and the team leader was moving between the response truck and UXO, I was looking around, the first time being up in that post area. Saw on the tree line what I thought was someone walking. Allegedly, people like to go up that way to gather mushrooms? Question mark? Wonder what kind of mushrooms he's talking about. Anyway, I'm about to call out to the person as they pass between trees. They can't be there. It's an active EOD incident and a possible explosive hazard. Then they just vanish. Just like vanished like dust in the wind. I told my team leader when he returned and we walked over to find them for safety reasons. I couldn't find a trace of them. The thing that makes it even weirder was that the person was dressed in 1850s uniform garb with a satchel. That part made me think of mushroom gathering. The only time I saw what I believe to be a ghost. I guess Fort Riley has some spooky features to it, like Camp Funston and World War I soldiers from the Spanish flu or the cavalry parade field. Some of these army bases are really old, like they've been there for a very long time. And there's a good possibility that there's probably a lot of people that died on that base or in the vicinity of that area, or the training areas for that matter. Next story is called the Fort Bragg Witch. I would assume that some of my buddies in the 82nd have heard about this story, haven't you? Honestly surprised I haven't seen it on here yet. There's a church in the middle of the training area out at Bragg that's abandoned as far as I can tell. Creepy old Civil War mass graves and one graveyard actually at the church with headstones. Okay, first off, there's an abandoned church out in the middle of Fort Bragg that's abandoned in the training area. Yo, that's creepy as hell. I had heard stories about it and I didn't think much of it, but there's this weird feeling feeling I get whenever I'm around it. Even sat in a patrol base pretty close to it, but as freaked out as we were, nothing too crazy was seen. But another time I was coming back from a deer hunt a few weeks ago and I saw a dark figure with piercing white eyes. That's my whole experience. Research of the area dates back from the Salem witch trials, mass graves to Civil War, exorcism in the 70s, the Wiccan movement of the early 2000s. Felt like a witch, in all honesty. I know I'm not the only one who's seen it or in or around the church. Most others don't say anything about the eyes, just a tiny womanly figure. People see shadows in the windows and feelings of being watched. People would catch glimpses of things on the inside past the windows. Yeah, you know, there's quick short story. There's a bunch of grave sites in the training area in Quantico, Virginia as well. Like probably Civil War era, like 1800s, maybe older for all I know. The training areas that the lieutenants go into to do land navigation, there's a bunch of places called TA 16, Training Area 16. There is a lot of graves, random grave sites throughout the whole training area. And it is spooky as hell out there at night. I'll tell you that. If you've ever been out in the training area at night, yeah, that's an emotional experience. I never saw anything or heard anything weird like that, but I do remember seeing all the graves during final day land navigation because like it's daytime, you can see everything at that point. And I was just like, whoa, would not want to be up here at night. That'd be kind of creepy. Way deep in the tree line like that. No thanks, I'm good. All right, next one's called NTC Op 4. I'm Op 4. And last rotation, we had a SBCT from JBLM come as a RTU, and we had dropped off camo nets for an infantry platoon from JBLM. They were guest Op 4 near our hide site about 500 meters north of us in these old buildings. So fast forward about 8 hours later, it was about 0300. My TC and I just got done pulling our guard shift. I was putting my cot back together on the back deck of my OSV and I started to hear footsteps near us. I whispered to my TC asking if he heard it. Hey, did you hear that, bro? And he did too. So he grabbed our night vision goggles. We were looking around all around us. We didn't see shit. This goes on for about 15 minutes and then stops. So I bed down and about 10 minutes later, I hear them again, but close as shit. And I'm yelling out, hey, who is there? And I hear footsteps. I'm still looking around through my NVGs and I still can't see shit. It was too loud of footsteps to be a coyote too. You can hear them get closer and closer. Then they stopped. Then when they started back up again, it was louder footsteps. And it sounded like they were circling us. But then it stops again. And we wake up the following day. I'm so exhausted. I got about 2 hours of sleep. And our LMTV drops our chow off to us for the whole platoon and our guest Op 4 attachment. I asked a couple of them if they had anybody go down to us last night around 0300 and they said no. They were the only ones anywhere near us. So no idea what could have been. Yeah, that's creepy. Bro. It's hard to explain that away. I mean, they could have been messing with him just to see if they could mess with him because military members do that with each other sometimes. It's possible. I don't know. All right, the next one's called The Runner. I was on Fort Stewart, probably summer of 2016. My platoon was out in the middle of nowhere. We were practicing route reconnaissance. At the time, I was a lowly PFC and the driver of our truck. Yeah, as PFCs typically are, they usually end up being the driver or the gunners. We were told to expect Op 4, but I guess it didn't happen how we were expecting. As a truck crew, we had been awake about 36 hours. Our unit was mindlessly firing ammo into the woods so they could get the same amount next year. You know how it is. It says you know how it is in the book, literally. So anyway, the CO was feeling fun and called out trucks to spin up. We did. Then we went on a patrol. After a couple of hours, I started seeing a guy in my MVGs. He was sprinting at my truck. I call him to the gunner. He'd check with his thermals on the 240, but he didn't see shit. It happened 3 times that night. I was too tired to care. But nowadays, I think about what I saw and it scares me. I remember his eyes. He was mad. The other truck called contact right shortly after I saw him. I don't know if he was doing his thing or if we saw the same thing. He was in a uniform, like what you'd wear on the field, but he wasn't kitted up or anything. He scared the shit out of me. Like I said, 36 hours without sleep, but boy, I don't know how you can come up with that angry motherfucker running at my truck in your mind. I don't know. I mean, you can definitely have visual and auditory hallucinations, although like the visual hallucinations aren't as bad. Not like you don't envision like entire people, but like if you're, say for example, I've been in like a patrol base out in the jungle in Okinawa. If you look through the woods and through the tree line and through the leaves and stuff, like sometimes that stuff will like be doing like weird movements that might cast shadows that appear to be humans, and you might think that's what it is. But I've never had like a clear as day, hey, there's a person that's bats formed and materialized out of thin air running at the vehicle before. I've never had anything like that. Although, I mean, you know, maybe everyone has different reactions to not getting enough sleep. That's a possibility too. Anyway, the next story is called NTC Skinwalker. For those of you that don't know what NTC stands for, it's called the National Training Center, and it's a U.S. Army facility at Fort Irwin, California in the Mojave Desert, where units, primarily brigade combat teams, undergo realistic pre-deployment training in various aspects of warfare. Now, NTC for the Army is like what 29 Palms, California is for the Marine Corps. They basically send units there to test their abilities and their capabilities in a relatively realistic combat environment. They can be basically get the stamp of approval for deployment. Same thing for the Combined Arms Training Center at Marine Corps Base 29 Palms. Anyway, I went to NTC around 2016, which, as everyone knows, is in the middle of the desert in California, like we just talked about. We had just arrived a couple of days prior and grabbed our vehicles from the railhead. So now we have a sandy motor pool full of strikers. I was with the medics and we decided we needed a guard on our MEVs overnight. But what's an MEV? Don't know because I'm not in the Army, but we're going to find out. M1133 Medical Evacuation Vehicle. Okay, so basically what they are is they're strikers that were converted to medical evacuation because they're armored. That's kind of cool, but they're wheeled and not tracked. Okay, well, we're all learning something. Anyway, so being with one of the infantry platoons, I pulled the second night of guard duty for 4 hours with our recon medic. We got out of the vehicles around 2300 and had a 4-hour watch until we got relief. I remember bullshitting with the other record for about an hour until he had told me he had never dipped before. So being the soldier I was, I had to convince him to try some Copenhagen. Okay, naturally. In 2016, I don't believe Zyn existed or any of these like pouches. Like they had pouches, tobacco pouches, but they didn't have like nicotine pouches back then. It was just everybody dipped Copenhagen. That was just the way it was, or Grizzly. He sat there for about 5 minutes before he looked at me a little loopy and he said he had to take a crap. Of course, dude. If you've never dipped before and you throw a dip in, you will literally have an anal evacuation. We'll say that. While he walked away, I just stared off into space. This motor pool section of Ruba had streetlights lighting the vehicles throughout. During my thoughts, I finally saw some movement that caught my eye. I turned my head and looked in the direction of the vehicles. And I saw a perfectly illuminated and hairless dog-like creature hunched over on 2 legs under the light, like hunched over like raptors from Jurassic Park. Its front paws were pulled in like a dog laying down. Bro, what the hell? What? It was staring at me, and its eyes were shining like a dog that a flashlight had just hit. We stared down for the longest seconds of my life, and then it turned away and dipped out. It had looked like I caught it in headlights when I looked at it, and it had frozen, staring directly at me. It made a noise skittering along, kind of like a rat when I saw it move into my vision space. I saw it lean onto its front paws. That's when I took a double take and it was gone. I shook myself. When my partner came back from the Porta-John, I told him, he said it was probably a coyote with mange. But every time I think about it, I can't help but wonder why a mangy coyote would be on its hind legs looking directly at me. I had 2 NCOs and a couple other medics tell me they saw the same thing walking around the vehicles around midnight every night until we started movement. Bro. Yeah, that's pretty creepy. Something that looks like it's from Kaled in Elden Ring. Like one of those dogs. You know what I'm saying? Like just mangy, twisted, like an abomination. Yeah. I'm good. Wouldn't want to come into contact with anything like that, or I'd want to at least have some security rounds on me if I did. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. The next story is called Fort Huachuca Part 1. Ooh, so we're getting into a story that's separated into parts. So that'll be interesting. Anyway, we'll get to that in the next video, but let me know what you thought about this video in the comments below. And if you've ever had any spooky experiences in the military or during your time in, please put it in the comments below and share it with the rest of us. I'd like to put a compilation of spooky stories in the comments, and maybe the author, Nick Orton, will see it and include that in his next book. All right, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.